Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Mr. Cobalt and in this video I'm going to be going over again more naming formulas or naming compounds from their formulas. This video I'm going to go through a mixed batch, so it could be ionic, it could be covalent, it could be ionic with polyatomic ions or transition elements and things like that. It could be acids. So let's get into this. So first question you want to ask yourself when you're dealing with wide variety of different compounds and how to name them is you need to ask yourself questions that are going to categorize them. So the first question you want to ask yourself is this an ionic substance or a covalent substance? So if we look at A, right, so that's our first question. Is it covalent or is it ionic? Is it molecular or is it ionic, right? So the difference between an ionic and a molecular substance is one, of course, it's made up of ions, and the dead giveaway that you've got an ionic substance is that there's a metal and a nonmetal. Now that's not always the case, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment. But by and large, if you have a metal and a nonmetal, if you got metal and nonmetals together, you've got an ionic compound. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you don't have a metal and you just have nonmetals, and you know it's covalent, and then you go from there. So let's go with A here. So here we have aluminum and fluorine. Aluminum is a metal, fluorine is a nonmetal, so this is ionic. So now that we know we're in the ionic category, we have to ask ourselves a question about the metal. Is the metal a transition element or is it a main group or representative element? The reason we want to ask that question is because generally, if you have a transition element, that is going to have multiple charges and you're going to have to use a Roman numeral to identify the charge. If it's a main group element or representative element, then it's only going to have one charge and you don't need to use a Roman numeral. That's not always the case. There are exceptions like silver, cadmium, and zinc only have one charge, so they're not going to use a Roman numeral even though they're transition elements. And then you have tin and lead. Those are going to use Roman numerals even though they're not transition elements, they're main group elements. So there are exceptions. You need to know the exceptions. Aluminum here is not one of the exceptions. So it is not going to have a Roman numeral because it is not a transition element. It only has one charge. And so that is going to be a +3 charge. So here, since it's not a transition element, we don't need to use Roman numeral. Again, the way you name ionic compounds is simply put the names of the ions together. So as long as you know the names of the ions, just put those together and you've got the name of your compound. So here we got aluminum. So the name of the first ion is aluminum ion. So we'll write aluminum. The name of the second ion is where you have to drop the ending and add IDE. So for the first, you only write down the name of the element. For the second, you got to drop the ending, add IDE. So fluorine becomes fluoride. And that is the name of AlF3. Next, we have PF3. So again, is it ionic or covalent? Basically, do we have a metal or a nonmetal? Here we have only nonmetals, so this is covalent. So we're going to name this in the covalent way. But first, the next question we have to ask ourselves is, does it begin with hydrogen? Because if it begins with hydrogen, that's going to be a giveaway that it is an acid, and so we're going to have to name it like an acid rather than your normal binary covalent compound. Okay, so here it doesn't begin with hydrogen, so it's not going to be an acid. It's just going to be a binary covalent compound. We have two elements. So we're going to name this using our Greek prefixes. Remember, Greek prefixes are only used with covalent molecular compounds, not ionic compounds. Unless, of course, the Greek prefix is part of the name of the polyatomic ion already, which there are some. Okay, so here we have phosphorus. So the name of our first one is phosphorus. And remember, if you only have one of the first element, there's no prefix. We don't use mono. So it's just phosphorus. And then the third element, again, is fluorine. And so for the second one, we're going to have to drop the ending and add IDE again. So it is fluoride again. But this time for the 3, notice we have a 3 here. We didn't have to use a prefix for this because we know that the 3 is due to balancing of charge. Here, there's no balancing of charge, so we have to identify how many of the fluorines or fluorines we have in our how many fluorines we have in our molecule. So we have tri for 3, that's our Greek prefix, and then we just add fluoride. So phosphorus trifluoride is the name of this substance here, PF3. Second or third, letter C, we have H3PO4. Again, first question is this ionic or covalent? Do we have a metal on nonmetal, or is it just nonmetals? In this case, hydrogen, phosphorus, and oxygen are all nonmetals, so we have a covalent compound. Second question, is this an acid or not? If it's an acid, it begins with hydrogen, and in this case, it does have hydrogen at the beginning, so this is an acid. So we're going to have to name this as an acid. So again, we have 2 categories of acids. It's either the binary acid, which is made up of hydrogen and some one element, usually a halogen, or you have an oxyacid, which is made up of hydrogen and some polyatomic ion that has oxygen in it. And so in this case, we have PO4, that's phosphate ion that has oxygen. So this is an oxyacid. So the way you name oxyacids is you take the name of the polyatomic ion, in this case phosphate. You're going to drop the ending and add IC. So that becomes well, in this case, it's not going to be simply IC. This one, you do have to add an ORIC, so it becomes phosphoric rather than phosphoric acid. That's just, there's a historical reason behind why they're naming it that way. So there are exceptions where you just got to remember how the spelling goes. It wouldn't be phosphic, it would be phosphoric. So phosphoric. Right. So here we're kind of going back to this OR. So we dropped the AT and we're kind of going back to the OR, and we're just dropping the US here and adding IC. Why not just add IC there? I'm sure there's historical reasons that I'm not going to get into. And then here we have our name, and then we just add acid here, and that's the name of this acid, phosphoric acid. Remember, we're not going to have hydro here because hydro is only for binary acids, not oxyacids. So don't write hydrophosphoric acid. That's something different. Okay, so D, we have, again, our compound. Is it ionic or covalent? We have calcium as the metal, and we have carbon and oxygen. Those are nonmetals, so it is ionic. Second question, is the metal a main group element or a transition element? And we would say it's a main group or representative element, so it's only going to have one charge. So here it's just going to be calcium. There's no Roman numeral. And then we have CO3. You have to recognize that polyatomic ion. You need to know the name and the charge of it. So this is the carbonate ion. So here we have calcium carbonate. Next, E, we have CaHSO4 2. And so again, we have calcium, metal, these are non-metals. So this is ionic again. So we have an ionic substance. And calcium is not a transition element, so it's only going to have one charge. So we don't have to worry about a Roman numeral. So this is going to be calcium again. And then the name of this polyatomic ion you need to know, this is hydrogen sulfate. So hydrogen sulfate is the name of that. Hydrogen sulfate. So this is calcium hydrogen sulfate for the name. Next we have CuCl2. So again, we have a metal, which is copper, and Cl2, that's a non-metal. So this is ionic. Second question is this a main group metal or a transition metal? Copper is a transition metal, so it will have a Roman numeral. So we got to figure out the charge on the Roman numeral. We should know what the charge on chlorine is. It's in group 7. It needs one more electron to become like the noble gas. And so what we're going to do there is we're going to add an electron to that, and then by adding the electron, it becomes negative. So we got 2 negative chloride ions balancing out the copper, so that means copper has to be a 2 plus charge. So that's going to be Roman numeral 2. So that's going to be copper. Let's go ahead and put that down as COPPER with a 2 Roman numeral. And then that's the first part of the name of this compound. And then we just add the second part, which is the name of this here. Chlorine goes to chloride. We're dropping the INE ending. It becomes IDE. So we just add that. And so we got chloride at the end. So the name of this substance is copper 2 chloride. G. So here we have a substance. We ask our question, is this an ionic compound or a covalent compound? Here is where you need to be careful. If you just look at this and you say, well, they're all non-metals, so therefore it's not ionic, it's covalent, so I'm going to name it as a covalent substance. But we've only been dealing with binary covalent substances, so we know how to name those. But you're going to get stuck because we have 3 non-metals here. So how do you name that? Do you have prefixes for all 3 of them? Right? You haven't really run into this. So that should be a red flag that something has gone amiss. And that is you fail to recognize that the NH4 is actually a polyatomic ion. It's one of the polyatomic ions that's positive and is not a metal. So NH4 plus is an ion and F minus is another ion. So this is ionic. So we're going to name it like an ionic substance. So all we do is we figure out what the names of the ions are. NH4 plus, you should know, is ammonium. So that's the first part. Ammonium. Oops. Ammonium. Say that again. So that's the first part. And then we have fluorine here. Again, fluorine, you drop the ending, you add IDE, and it becomes fluoride. So FLUORID. So this is ammonium fluoride. Next, we have HCl aqueous. So HCl aqueous, the aqueous kind of identifies it as an acid. We're going to name it as an acid. If the aqueous wasn't here and it was just HCl, we could name this as a binary covalent compound, right? But since it says aqueous here, that's indicating that we want to name it as an acid. Notice that again we have H and Cl; those are nonmetals. That's not going to be a covalent. That's not going to be an ionic compound. It's going to be covalent. It begins with an H, so that it identifies it as an acid. So in this case, we're going to name this as an acid. So because this is two elements and there's no oxygen, it's not an oxyacid. So this is a binary acid. So we're going to name it like a binary acid. And so this is where hydro comes in. You will use hydro to identify that there's hydrogen. So that's the first element. So hydro. And then we add this second part, which is the second element. And remember, again, we're going to drop the ending of chlorine and add IC. So we're going to add chloric. So not chlorine, but chloric. And it's all one word. So we have hydrochloric, and then we just add the word acid. So hydrochloric acid. Next, we have NH4 3PO4. Again, at this point, you're like, aha, you're not going to fool me this time. I've got NH4 here. I know that's an ion. That's a polyatomic ion, ammonium. And then we have PO4. I know that one. That's a polyatomic ion. So I have two ions here. That's an ionic substance. So all I need to do is put the names together. So the first one is ammonium. And then we have PO4, that's phosphate. So I'm going to add phosphate. And that's the name of this substance, ammonium phosphate. So that's it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoy this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned from this video, if this was helpful in any way, then please, by all means, like the video, share the video, hit that like button over there. Also, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. When you do, make sure you click all so you can be notified by all the videos I put out. And finally, put a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. If you have a question, let me know what the question is. If you want me to cover a certain topic, if you have a thought, please let me know down below. Thanks for joining me and have a great day.